Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading Charles Band-related podcast that is not hosted by Mr. Band himself. I am respected middle-of-the-road feminist Jared Hornbeck, and I just want to know, who is driving this feminist studies Jeep around with me today?
Well, it is I, the crazy head of the Piranha Women, Steve Guntley, here from Austin, Texas, a.k.a. the Avocado Jungle of Death. This is the podcast that's all about smart women, stupid, insensitive men, and lots of guacamole. That's because this is an episode all about cannibal women in the Avocado Jungle of Death. And we have a special guest joining us today, a person who has identified this movie as their favorite movie of all time. And this is a position I'm bringing you here to defend, and I'm not going to make fun of you too terribly much. Ailish Collins is joining us today. Hello.
Hello. Bit of a hyperbolic introduction, but it's up there.
It's up there.
I
It's
show
up
it
there.
to everyone.
You have. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you've definitely, I know you break this DVD out whenever, new people come over.
Yeah, it's like a party trick.
So I want to talk about that in a little bit, but I just want to know, so we know that now, but Steve, do you have a party trick DVD? Do you have a movie that's sort of a litmus test for a group of people that you break out when you have company?
You know what? It used to be The Room, and then everybody started doing that. Now
Sure.
now The Room is kind of canonical. Like, everybody's seen it, and everybody. So, I do like bringing out, when I have a party or something, I like breaking out a good, bad movie. And so my go-to now is one of the pair of John Fasano classics, either Rock and Roll Nightmare or Black Roses. Those are my two that I'm going to break out when people are looking to have a good rockin' time. But
Do you consider Zombie Nightmare to be a John Fasano classic?
I haven't seen Zombie Nightmare.
Oh man,
do I need to check that one out?
If you like John Fasano and if you're a fan of John Michael Thor,
Obviously, I'm a fan of John Michael Thor. Yeah, and he fights rubber starfish better than anyone I've ever seen. He's one of the greats.
oh yeah, you have to check out Zombie Nightmare. I would say watch it first as is, and then watch the Amazing Mystery Science Theater 3000 episode.
Oh, okay.
On it, I would do it in that order. What I used to do, I'm going to say used to because I haven't had the opportunity lately.
Yeah.
Like I would still, given the opportunity, Sleepaway Camp.
Yes.
For me. That was the one where it was like, oh, you want to watch something? You've never seen this movie? Oh, strap in.
Ailish, have I made you do Sleepaway Camp yet?
No, you also haven't made me do your other two movies.
Okay.
I've lived here for a few months.
I cannot believe we haven't gone on that. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, Sleepaway Camp is definitely up there. Like my friends back in Washington, we have an annual party where we all need to bring one person who's never seen Sleepaway Camp, not tell them a single thing about what they're going to see, and we bring them in. We've got printed out rules for drinking games and stuff like that. It's a big event every year.
That's amazing.
That movie's pretty incredible. This movie today is a very interesting artifact for us for a couple of reasons. Firstly, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like this is one of the few straight comedies we're going to be talking about on this show. Like, most of the Empire and Full Moon output is either horror, sci-fi, or maybe horror comedy or sci-fi comedy, things like that. It's usually tinged with some kind of genre. And this is kind of just a straight parody film.
I'm glad you said that. That was literally the first thing that I have written in my notes is just straight comedy ?
Yeah, one of the only ones that we're gonna do. This is also the very last Empire film. This is the last one that they were able to squeak out before the entire company went under and Charles Band pivoted over to Full Moon. So this is one of the last Charles Band produced films to actually get a small theatrical release. Like all of his films, it did better on VHS than it did in theaters, but it made its money. This is a very cheap movie, and it made its money back, and it's enjoyed some small cult success. I'm curious.
I mean, it's someone's favorite movie
It's at
who's
least
sitting in on this recording,
It's at
so
least
it has to have
one person.
It has to have, it has to have achieved some success. I think it's important to point out the role that Paramount and Jim Giannopoulos had in this movie, which was basically Empire was falling apart, and somehow Charles Band made this connection with Paramount, and they were like, all right, well, we're going to strike up a deal with you for distribution. Why don't you go ahead and get some of these movies made that you have sold these ideas for? And Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death was one of them. And it was made and released on video and made them a good amount of money, and I think really led to Paramount's confidence in Charles Band to put out straight to video material that then they would then distribute. Like, I feel like the success of this movie in that medium had a lot to do with Full Moon becoming what it would become, both in terms of success and business model.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is kind of one of the unsung movies in terms of that journey, you know, because like whatever it is, Charles Band has that weird magic that he can sell a movie with a completely ridiculous title like this and a whole bunch of other ridiculous titles. We just talked about Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama, and we said that that might be the best or funniest title of any movie that we talk about. Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death is a contender as well. Just the sheer amount of syllables is funny.
Yeah, I watched this movie initially because I saw the title, and I was like, well, I got to know what the fuck that is.
Okay. How old were you when you saw this for the first time?
18.
Okay. All right. So what was it that really, you just thought it was going to be like
I thought it was going
or...
to not have any, like, it wasn't going to know what it was. It was going to be an unintentionally bad movie. And it is a movie that very much knows what it is and really leans into its silliness and its stupidity and is very self-aware.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I've got some like behind-the-scenes stuff to talk about here. So this movie was released theatrically March 15th, 1989. It's written and directed by J.F. Lawden, who's billed here as J.D. Athens. And it stars Shannon Tweed, Bill Maher, Adrienne Barbeau, and Karen Mistal. So this is the directorial debut of J.F. Lawden. He uses that alias, like I mentioned here. He would direct two movies with Bill Maher. The other one is called Pizza Man. It would come out in 1991. But he would find a much, much more lucrative career as a screenwriter. So Charles Band actually mentions this story in his book. Around the time they were making this movie, J.F. Lawden brought him a script that he wanted Band to produce. It was a dark, gritty drama about a Hollywood prostitute trying to build a new life for herself and kick her drug habit. And he thought it was a really good script, but he said, this isn't really the kind of thing I like to produce. There's barely any murderous dolls in this at all. So he passed on it, but wished him luck. J.F. Lawden wound up pitching this movie to Disney, where it was purchased by their Touchstone label. It was given to director Gary Marshall, who insisted that they lighten up the tone a little bit, give it a happy ending, and change the title. And that worked out pretty well because they made a movie called Pretty Woman, which would wind up making more than $400 million at the box office. And I believe it was the highest grossing live-action Disney film until Pirates of the Caribbean. I think that's actually, I think that's still true. It still might be the highest grossing because it was much, much cheaper than Pirates of the Caribbean. But after that, he would go on to write a couple of other movies. Like, I still find it hard to believe that the same writer of Cannibal Women and Pretty Woman also wrote Under Siege, the Steven Seagal.
The best Steven Seagal movie.
Kind of the only watchable Steven Seagal movie. And
I am not going to agree with that assessment,
Okay.
but I will say that Under Siege is the best one, I think, because his name escapes me. Andrew something
Davis.
made that. Andrew Davis, who also directed The Fugitive.
Yeah, and The Bodyguard.
Made Under Siege, and that's actually a very, very fun movie. I get some enjoyment out of. So I'll go full circle here back to my history with this movie, because I was going to say I spent a lot of hours watching Out for Justice, Above the Law, Hard to Kill, Marked for Death on cable when those Seagal movies were new. And the same thing with this movie. I didn't really know what to make of this one. By title alone, I think I saw it in like the preview guide on cable and thought, yes, I need to see this movie, whatever this is. But I think my initial watch, I was expecting something way more in the spirit of like Emmanuel.
Right, yeah.
I was thinking like this was going to be a Zalman King
Or even a David
type.
Dakota, like this could have been like a test tube teens kind of situation. Yeah.
Right. And then it was very strange to see this movie be the one place where I think I've seen Shannon Tweed wearing the most clothing.
Which Band makes a joke about in his book. He said that makes us almost more controversial than anything else, is that we kept Shannon Tweed clothed this entire movie.
Yeah, and sometime around the time that I saw those Torchlight movies, one or two that we've talked about and some that we'll talk about in the future, I remember seeing this and my initial reaction was like, this, and I think this was probably true for a lot of people, really subverted expectations, because I thought that I was going to get some softcore movie, but no, this in spirit, it really just is. I didn't remember from the times I saw it 30 years ago how much of a straight Apocalypse Now parody this movie is.
Yeah, it really is. Like, down to the villain being named Kurtz. Like, or not the villain, I guess, the cult leader or whatever. Yeah, it's more ambiguous.
She's villainous.
Yeah, she's a piranha woman. Yeah.
She is.
But we should talk about Shannon Tweed for a moment, because, like, if you're around our age and you're hearing that name, you're immediately thinking, like, low-budget softcore, because that is... This movie actually came out before she became, like, the queen of the erotic thriller. That would happen, like, in the 90s. At this point, she was a former Playboy Playmate of the Month. She did pop up in a lot of movies, like, not averse to being nude on film, but that wasn't really her whole shtick at this point. Honestly, at this point, she was probably better known for being, like, engaged to Gene Simmons from Kiss, and they're still together to this day. Horrible human being, Gene Simmons from Kiss.
Yeah, I was just watching this movie, and part of me was just feeling bad. Just like, I'm so sympathetic towards this character and actress. I just feel so bad that she has to spend time with Gene Simmons on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so I think from 1990 to about 2002, Shannon Tweed would do about 30 different direct-to-video erotic thrillers. And I think her name just kind of became synonymous with those kind of movies from here on out. And now when we think back on her, that's what we think about. I think she shows some comedic chops here. I think she's actually quite funny, and she's playing the deadpan kind of intellectual type. And I think she's good here.
I have no disagreement there. I actually think, as much as I hate to give Bill Maher credit for anything, I think everyone in this movie knows what movie they're in, and they're all kind of good.
Yeah, I mean, here's where I'm going to run into my biggest roadblock that I have with this movie, and that is that I just have a very deep aversion to Bill Maher as a human being, and it's not even necessarily anything that he's doing or anything to say. It's how sometimes, like, they're just actors that you just, like, grind against, and this is Bill Maher is mine, and he doesn't really act much. He only is in these two movies, and then he's got his, like, really smug, obnoxious talk shows. But something about him really drives me crazy, and this has been our sticking point when we talk about this movie. This is the thing I can't really get past.
Yeah, I think if it were anyone other than Bill Maher, you would like this movie significantly more than you do.
I agree.
And I think it's probably the biggest thing that comes into play in our age difference is I just don't care about Bill Maher.
Yeah.
He was never really a thing for me. I know he sucks, but, like,
right,
that's it. Yeah.
Well, he's sort of perfect for this role because he exudes smarmy asshole.
He does, and I think maybe if I just knew he wasn't like that in real life too, maybe if I knew that he was, like, giving a performance or poking fun at, like, a type that he wasn't, maybe I could get over the hump. And I don't know the man. I don't know anything really about it. I don't know what he's like. I know that there's something about his on-screen persona that really just kind of makes my skin crawl. And it's probably not fair. It's not very nice of me to say, but it is a thing. It's a sticking point I have with this movie.
It's not fair for Bill Maher. It's really not fair for Craig Wasson, because we were talking about Body Double, and I was like, oh, I really like Craig Wasson's performance, and you were like, well, I can't get over the fact that he looks like Bill Maher.
Which is entirely unfair because he does not have the same vibe. I like him a lot in Nightmare 3, you know, like it's mean of me, but I don't know what it is. There's just something that just really makes my skin crawl about the guy. At this point in his career, he was a stand-up. He was a successful stand-up. He'd had a few bit parts on TV shows and movies. I think he's got like a walk-on part in House 2, The Second Story, which is a great subtitle for a sequel. Mm-hmm. But this is the first time he's ever been like the lead role in anything. And he is cast to play a stupid, chauvinistic man.
And he does a great job.
He's doing a great job, you know, like, and you've made this point that we're not supposed to like him, and I'm perfectly capable of drawing that distinction with most other movies, with almost any other movie.
It's like, how much acting is he doing?
That's the thing. I'm bumping up against that in a way that is, again, probably very unfair. But let's get into talking about the movie itself, because there really is a lot to like here, and I think the script is actually quite clever in a lot of ways. So this, why don't you take us through it, Ailish? You have a better grasp of the plot here.
The biggest responsibility I've ever gotten on a podcast. Okay. Well, so you know we have our core characters, and we're introduced to them pretty early. Well, first we start with boobies, which is essential, I guess.
PG-13 boobs.
We start with PG-13 boobs.
They really snuck them in there.
They did.
They were like, we get one pair, maybe two pairs.
We get a handful
to keep this rating.
We get a solid handful, but we start out learning of the danger of the piranha women as these two adventurers are wandering into the avocado jungle for their treasure of avocados, and they get killed by the piranha women.
They do.
Who are these beautiful, largely nude, dangerous women.
Yeah.
And so then we, move to our main characters. We have, oh my God, what's her name? The Shannon Tweed's character.
Hunt? Dr.
Yes,
Hunt?
thank you. Dr. Hunt, who is a professor of anthropology and feminist studies. Very, beautiful, intelligent career woman. And then we have her student, Bunny, who dresses like Barbie, is pretty witless and wants to become a feminist studies major, but isn't sure if they have any feminist cooking classes.
And she's played by Karen Waldron, who I think is quite funny.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
Bunny is quite funny in this movie. She's got a really good.
Yeah, she's got the Kelly Kapowski look.
Very
she's
much
like super
so.
tan with the fluorescent lip gloss or lipstick, and the hair is teased up.
She's got like a new outfit in every scene, and like she's always looking cute.
She's got a really good energy in this movie.
Yeah, she's a lot of fun. And we learn that there is this large unexplored jungle right next to Disneyland that is the Avocado jungle, and the piranha women are preventing people from accessing these avocados, which is apparently California's and the United States' main source of income. So this is a huge issue.
Yeah, #1 export. Yeah. Never stopped.
And so they need like this feminist studies professor to go out into the avocado jungle to find the piranha women and talk sense into them. But everybody's afraid to go out there. Can I
say quickly, we did an episode on a movie called Piranha Women. They did not use the phrase piranha women as much as they use it in this movie.
They did not. Those women were literally spliced with piranhas.
Yeah, there are no mouthy boobs here, just regular boobs.
Oh my God, I forgot about the boob mouth.
If you go back and listen to our episode on Piranha Women, if you have missed that one.
So she needs a guide to get through the avocado jungle, and there's a very funny scene. Go into this really like down and dirty bar, and they're talking to a couple of action movie stereotype characters. There's like an actual Rambo guy with a big machine gun that he's just firing in the air. There's like a wrestler.
There's a ninja.
There's a ninja.
A ninja.
Yes. Yeah.
Like this is one of the funnier sequences, and then like she tells them where they're going, and they're all like, "No, fuck this, we're not going out there." Like, they're
all terrified of the piranha women.
Yeah, but they do find a guide in Jim, who is kind of a sloppy drunk hanging out in the bar. This is played by Bill Maher. He's just kind of a dyed-in-the-wool chauvinist who just doesn't fear these women at all because he doesn't take them seriously as threats.
Well, and it should be mentioned that A, he's only allowed to come because he has a guidebook that is now out of print and he refuses to sell it to them. And B, he and Dr. Hunt have a past a romantic past of sorts.
Of like, don't they say like they had like a one night
They had a
stand that
one-night
she
stand.
regretted, and he's blowing it up into something more important.
Yes.
Pretty funny, actually pretty funny scene where he keeps trying to give his monologue about slipping into a whiskey bottle, and she keeps correcting him about how casual the affair was and how short the affair was. One thing in the scene, did you guys catch this? Maybe this was where I watched it. So I watched this on Tubi. I'm not sure.
Oh,
where
we
you
own the
guys
Blu-ray.
I was going to say, you watched, I'm sure this was screened from your own personal collection. You know, one of the 10 copies and formats that you have.
I
of
did
this
used to
movie.
have 2 copies.
But I think there is a really strange moment of ADR where the wrestler and the bodybuilder, when after he's the last one to back away from the challenge, he starts, like, they all give like a weird excuse, like the Robert Downey Jr. and Tropic Thunder guy is like, oh, I left the oven on or something, or I did this, and the ninja is like, I have to go do I forget what exactly they say. But then the bodybuilder is the last one, and his part is extended, except whatever the line that was dubbed, A, does not match his mouth at all, and B, is clearly spoken by someone of a different race.
Yeah, there was something weird. What's his line? He's talking about how he needs to go on a diet or something. Like, that's his excuse, is that he's like feeling a little doughy, and he's clearly not, and he just needs to go on a diet.
It's 100. I really am curious what the original line was, because that's not at all what it was.
Yeah.
And if you watch the ADR, it's very strange. Like, I wonder, I don't know. I mean, this was 1988 they were making this movie, so I don't think they were too cognizant about being too, like, culturally appropriate. But I wonder if it was something that was, like, very bad to the point where they went back and did it. Or it was just, you know, like a lot of these movies, the sound mixing and budget and equipment just didn't pick up whatever the line was, and they thought, oh, well, that one wasn't very funny anyway, let's do something different. But whatever the case, it is odd. So if you get a chance to go back and watch that scene in particular, I paused it and rewound it. I wish I had written down the exact words, but it is strange.
Yeah. I mean, from here, it's kind of just like a long stretch of just sort of like them walking through the jungle and bantering a bit, right? Like, because it takes a while for them to find the tribe.
There is a good amount of banter. There's also a good amount of humor within the jungle, because you have to remember they're literally right next to San Bernardino, right next to Disneyland. Like, we get a nice map with Mickey Mouse ears right next to this jungle. And there's like a hippo in there. There's a jaguar that Buddy just sits and pets for a little bit. They really play up the absurdity of this unexplored jungle just in the middle of California.
I had seen this movie before, but I didn't. I think maybe my first or second viewing of the movie, again, I was waiting for, well, when does this turn into softcore? And so watching it this time and recognizing from minute one, oh no, this is a full-blown comedy. This is satire. This is a parody. And knowing a little bit more about J.Up Lawton and what he would go on to write, I started sort of looking at, okay, well, let me see what they're going to do here. Let me see what they're going to reference. Let me see what they're going to throw in. And the absurdity in it got some genuine laughs out of me this time.
No, there really are a few good gags, and I feel like the script overall is actually pretty smart. Like you were saying, it's really kind of a takedown of like the perception of like second wave feminism and the way that it was like kind of gate kept a bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's this. Should I go into it now?
Go into it now.
Okay, all right.
By all
Do
means.
it. I can literally not think of a better time than for you to go into this.
I mean, you know, I was not alive in the 80s participating in feminism then, but I think a lot of what was happening then stretched into the 2000s and 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this idea of like the ideal feminist, which is what Shannon Tweed's character is. She's a very intelligent career woman. She's naturally beautiful. She's not going looking for male attention, but she still, owns her own sexuality.
Yeah.
Which can only be done, really, if you're naturally beautiful.
Obviously.
But then we also have Bunny who doesn't get to be a feminist. She hasn't earned it because she's not smart enough. She's just a little too much.
She's like a girly girl.
She's a girly girl, yeah. And she also, she's like, oh, I'll either be a housewife or I'll be the first female president. And at this time, being a housewife is not an accepted form of feminism.
Right.
And then we have Dr. Kurtz, who is the radical feminist. She is, she thinks women are superior to men.
Literally a man-eater.
Literally a man-eater. Yeah. And so we have this okay, well, there's these feminists who have gone too far. And then we have these people who don't get to be feminists either. And I will say that, we get Jacques at the end. And I think that is the first time for me that I had seen in movie form, men also get to be feminists now.
Okay.
Yeah, because we have Jim, who sucks, but then we have Jacques, who's he gets to be a feminist.
Is this the big muscly guy at the end?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I think it makes some pretty, well-observed points that feel maybe a little quaint, in 2023, when, kind of our perceptions of feminism and all of that has shifted a bit. But this is sort of commenting on Andrea Dworkin era feminism. This is and also just how stupid men perceive it as a threat.
Yes, there's also the idea of they're trying to pacify the Piranha women and turn them all more into bunnies. They're trying to take the feminism and away and make them into housewives.
Yeah,
by giving them condos and Mary Kay deliveries.
And Cosmo magazine.
And Cosmo magazine. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
So I think that the next kind of big plot point is when they come across the village of the subservient men, which are being called Donahues. Now, I had to actually look this up a little bit because I knew who Phil Donahue's still alive, so I know who he was, or who he is, and I know he had a TV show when I was a kid that I never really watched. But I was curious why he was kind of getting singled out as sort of the subservient man here. And I'm not really clear still. I know he's married to Marlo Thomas from That Girl. She was a 60s actress. And I know she's a big philanthropist and has a lot of sway. And so I don't know if that was the perception. Were you a little bit more aware of Donahue?
Without having looked into it, my takeaway from this is sort of these are emotionally in tune men. I think maybe I did watch some Donahue when I was a kid, and maybe that's, he would encourage guests to get more emotional, or there was a lot of drama and a lot of emotions running wild on the show. And maybe the view at the time was that he was a more passive feminine male. I don't remember that to be the case necessarily, but I when I heard it referenced here, that was where my brain went. And so listeners, if you know of another reason why these subservient men are called Donahues, by all means, please tell us.
Yeah.
If it has nothing to do with Phil Donahue, but there's so much specificity that dates this when it does. There's so much talk about David Letterman in this movie that it's it has to be Phil Donahue.
Yeah. They really were sticking it to Letterman quite a bit in this movie.
Yes.
Yeah, but they basically, Jim tries to corrupt this village of subservient men that they keep alive to tend to them by teaching them more masculine traits like drinking beer and belching
and catcalling.
Catcalling.
He teaches them how to catcall.
Well, let me ask you, what do you think and I mean, I was alive and I was conscious, but I don't really remember because I hadn't seen the source material, but was it still a novel thing in 1989 to do a straight 2001 reference?
I think
throwing the beer cans in the air and having them spin around, and then there's also Sprach Zarathustra type moment in the score, and it was just very I feel like now we're at the point where I think more people recognize 2001 from parody than they do from the source material.
Honestly, yeah.
And I just wondered, like, was this at the beginning of that, or had people been doing that for a long time, or was it sort of, oh, this movie's 20 years old, let's reference it because people will have forgotten about it?
Yeah, I feel like even by this point, like, that parody had been done quite a bit. Like, and now it's like really been beating the ground. I remember like some people were getting kind of like pissy about the Barbie teaser trailer because it was like a direct 2001 parody. And they're like, really? We're still doing this? Like 50 years later, we're still doing 2001 parodies? But yeah, I don't think it was the freshest thing in the world, but it is, 30 years removed. So, it's at least it's in the first wave, I would say, of 2001 parodies. So where do we go from here? Do we go to the Piranha Women tribe, or do we meet the other tribe?
No, we go to the Piranha Women tribe first. They make their way into the Piranha Women. They get accepted by Dr. Kurtz.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is Adrienne Barbeau.
Yes.
And who they only had her for one day on filming, so they cranked out her entire role in one afternoon. And she's good.
Really enjoy seeing
She's always
her.
fun.
Yeah, I mean, she's always a welcome presence in everything. I want to go back and watch more of it because I gave it sort of an unfair shake, but I was not a big fan of the Creep Show anthology show that came out a couple of years ago. But when Adrienne Barbeau popped up on that, I was super happy to see her, and that made me stick it out through the episode. And I think at this time, 1988, 89, was she still Mrs. John Carpenter, or they weren't married? They were partners. I think, but I think, was she still with him at this time?
They had already split by this time because, she was in a lot of his early movies, and then kind of like stopped appearing in his films. Let me see.
She left him for Swamp Thing. That's what
they
happened.
divorced in 1984. And then she married Billy Van Zandt, who, Swamp Thing. Yeah. But yeah, she's great in this. She's a great presence, and obviously a very clear reference to Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now.
If you use the same name, is it a reference?
That's the thing. Yeah, it's not even a reference. It's just like, oh yeah, guess what? We're doing this. Yeah. So where do they go from here?
Yeah, so Bunny and Dr. Hunt get accepted, but they get the cute little outfits, all of that. But they both have to make sacrifices. So Dr. Hunt gets this blonde, muscular man who's very polite and well-spoken and clearly intelligent named Jacques, who is totally fine with everything that's happening, honestly. He's pretty cool with it all.
I do have one correction. His name is Jean-Pierre.
Oh, shit. His name is Jean-Pierre. You're right. And then Bunny gets told that she has to sacrifice Jim. And Dr. Hunt is, she's not as on board as Bunny is, but Bunny wants to become a Piranha Woman because she wants the cute outfit.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they do have to have sex with their men before they kill them. This is an important part of it.
Yeah, it's like a praying mantis kind of situation.
Yes.
And then we eventually do encounter the rival tribe that also lives out in the Avocado Jungle of Death, and these are the Barracuda women. And really the big difference in their ideologies is that the Piranha women are all about guacamole, while the Barracuda women are all about clam dip. And I really, really, really got to side with the Piranha women on this one. I don't know why you would go for a clam dip if you have guacamole.
It's a weird second choice. Like when I think of on the hierarchy of dips.
Yeah, I would say salsa. Like,
you've got guacamole, salsa, French onion dip. Like clam dip is such a oddly specific one. Like it's not where my brain would. So that one criticism I will give to the movie is that there are moments in the script where some of the gags are very heavily telegraphed. Yeah. And that's one of them where she's like, okay, well, tell me about your ideological differences. And she's like, well, the Piranha women think that men should be eaten with guacamole. And it's like, okay, well, so they're going to say men should be eaten with a different dip. I got it. Clam dip still took me by surprise because I was kind of like, that is the oddest second choice of a dip. I don't know that I've ever gone to a party and the spread has been like a guacamole and clam dip next to each other. Like, I don't even like, what is clam dip? Like, I feel like you can go to a seafood restaurant and you can get something that's got minced clams and maybe garlic and cheese or something in it, but it's not ubiquitous.
No.
Like, you're not going to the grocery store and getting the Tostitos brand clam dip off the shelf and taking it home.
I grew up with
So
clam
I'm
dip.
with you.
Did you
This
really?
clam dip was a
Ooh,
very
tell it-
common
okay.
thing in.
Well,
Tell
I mean,
us
you
more,
grew up on
please.
the coast,
I
so,
grew
like,
up on
you-
the coast, and I grew up in like a partially Swedish family that had, we ate oyster stew every Christmas, stuff
Okay.
like that. But it is clam dip. It's not uncommon on the coast, I don't think.
Okay, so I think it's appropriate for this point in this show. Can you, like, besides clams, what is in a clam
I've never
dip?
actually made it, but I assume mayonnaise.
All right, see, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm
Probably.
hard out on this.
Yeah,
This sounds horrible.
it's good with potato chips. I've never made it, but it's always been there at potlucks and stuff like that. Clam dip has always been present.
You know what else is good with potato chips? Literally anything else.
I think clam dip has
Anything.
been more present than guacamole throughout my life at potlucks.
That's insane to me. That is insane. So you are a Barracuda woman.
I
Would
am
you
a
say?
barracuda.
Wow,
woman.
and you were so close to growing up on the coast, right by the avocado jungle.
Yeah.
Just north of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, this is a coastal thing because I grew up on the East Coast, and I really don't know what clam
Yeah.
dip is. And so
I was
this is,
landlocked, so the closest thing we had to clams were Rocky Mountain oysters, which are bull testicles. So,
I was
different thing.
Going
different
to
thing.
ask, in the 80s, was clam already slang for a vagina?
I don't know.
I think that goes back
It must
I
be.
think, I mean, I was a kid, so I wasn't just throwing the term around loosey goosey, but like, I would think it was. I think it goes back a lot further than that. I think most of those nicknames go back at least to like vaudeville times.
I mean,
and
yeah.
the 20s and 30s or even before.
I'm not sure if that's even like a intentional reference or anything like that, or if it's just that clam dip is just kind of a joke food of the 80s. Sometimes that'll happen. Like there are foods that go in and out of vogue, like in a weird way, and like maybe that was just one of those things you served to your friends at 80s parties along with a nice bottle of Zima.
It could have been. I was a little bit surprised that the Piranha Women, didn't offer Dr. Hunt and Jim and Bunny some Bartles
Yes.
and James.
Enjoy this ramaki, please.
Because that's what my parents had at every get together was the
wine
cooler
coolers.
filled with Bartles and James
Oh my
wine coolers.
goodness. All right, so where do we go from here? I think that we need to rescue the.
We need to rescue Jim and Bunny
Hmm.
because Jean-Pierre and Dr. Hunt have escaped, and now they need to go back to rescue him. And Bunny is preparing to sleep with him and then kill him. She is all gung-ho. My biggest criticism of this movie is that she doesn't.
Yeah, I would have liked it more.
Yeah. But they managed to rescue him. Dr. Hunt and Dr. Kurtz get into a fight, and Dr. Kurtz falls into the piranha pit where she is eaten. They have a piranha pit, and she gets eaten by piranhas.
More specifically, she throws herself into the piranha
She
pit
does.
because she refuses to go on the talk show circuit again. We forgot to mention Professor Kurtz was like a renowned feminist author who had to do all these talk shows and had to go on David Letterman and stuff like that. And she chooses death rather than having to face David Letterman again. So I really wonder if J.F. Lawden had like a axe to grind with Letterman or something. He really takes a beating in this movie.
Yeah, this movie hates David Letterman, and I don't really know the reasoning behind that. And you were talking before about Jim getting captured by some of the it is the Piranha Women, right? Who get him? It's not the Barracuda Women, is
No, the
it?
Barracuda women are very
get Jim?
briefly there. They help with the rescue, but mostly
Right.
because they're anti-piranha women.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff, it's such a like it's like a Bugs Bunny cartoon to the point where he's in a giant pot getting marinated, and he picks up a carrot and says, "What's up, Doc?" And I was expecting him to, look at the camera at some point in this movie and say that he should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque.
Right. Yeah, it's basically on that level. But with our big happy ending here, like Bunny and Jim getting married,
Yeah.
like a pairing that had no kind of like they were setting it up the whole time that
The
Margot
biggest-
and Jim would somehow work something out, I guess.
Yeah, Margot and Jean-Pierre are together, and Jean-Pierre is now enrolled at the university,
Mm-hmm.
taking various feminist studies classes. and then Jim and Bunny get married. But the setup for that was that Bunny reveals her sexual fetish is getting tied up with licorice rope. And then at some point, Jim mentions that he really likes licorice rope.
Yes.
And that's
all it takes.
how we know they're getting
That's all it
together.
takes. Yeah. If you're struggling, listeners, and you're really trying to attract a mate and you want something foolproof to not waste your time anymore, eschew the dating apps and just buy some licorice
That's all you
ropes.
need.
Is it still available? Can you still buy licorice rope?
Oh, I'm sure you can. Like,
Listeners, I apologize to anyone licorice enthusiasts out there. I hate licorice. It is my least favorite flavor profile, the anise flavor.
Yeah.
Both Twizzlers are less offensive.
like the red
But like true
licorice.
Licorice
Licorice.
rope is a red.
black licorice
Black
especially.
licorice is vile. The really good ones you want to get are the Twizzlers that are filled. Yeah, they've got
Yeah.
like they
Like cherry and lemon filled Twizzlers.
those are real good.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Hook those up.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, and coming from an Italian-American family who would pull out the Sambuca with their espresso at the end of a meal, I was just like, no. Thank you. That is the worst flavor in the world.
No, it's an I'm
Sorry, I feel like I let my family down.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. But hey, it works for Bunny and Jim. So good luck to those wacky kids. Yeah, I mean, and that's pretty much where we end up. It's a very thin movie overall. Like, and I will say that's kind of one of the flaws of it. Like, I think there's a lot of really funny stuff here, but there is a lot of kind of dead air. You know, there's a lot of just sort of spinning their wheels where nothing particularly funny is happening. Maybe one or two good gags, but like, there's a lot of padding in this 90-minute movie.
I'll give you that. There's some padding, but I do generally enjoy the padding they have. I think it's very entertaining and silly padding.
It's very silly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you trying to tell me that a movie with the title Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death has some silly moments and maybe not everything that happens is integral to the plot?
I'm really sorry to break this to you.
Frankly, I'm shocked.
I'm sorry to I should have let you down more easily there. I should have preambled that a little bit more.
Yeah. One thing I want to focus on a little bit, though, is we did kind of run through the plot, and essentially, if you know the plot to Apocalypse Now, you know what this is, except with jokes. One thing that I want to highlight, though, is that I do think it should be pointed out just how important this movie is to what our mission statement is of this show. Because, as I mentioned earlier briefly, this movie really enabled Charles Band to strike up this deal with Paramount, and he was sort of the golden child for Paramount for a while because he started putting out these VHS movies that were selling like crazy. And I mean, I guess also we mentioned in a couple of the shows, because how can you talk about Charles Band without mentioning it, but really the forefather to home video rental. And so this movie was successful enough, and then there were a couple of other ones that Paramount banged out, that Paramount distributed, that really let Charles put his time and money into pitching and making Full Moon a thing. It's interesting. It's an interesting thought exercise. Had this failed, like had they tried to do this and then pulled the plug and said, no, I mean, knowing what we know about Charles Band from having listened or read these books, I should say, and listened to podcasts and interviews and stuff with him, is that he is very resilient and finds a way to bounce back in business after plenty of double crossing and backstabbing and maybe some questionable economic decisions. But I think, this helped set him up and set the tone for what Full Moon would become. And then after that, Torchlight and Moonbeam, because I think they realized like this guy can work within all of these different genres. I think maybe on the surface, someone would say, oh, this is a straightforward comedy parody movie that is, it's got a killer title and probably a good poster to start. But this is from the guy who, whose company was distributing Reanimator and Dolls and From Beyond. Like, somebody could have just been like, what is this? You know, you're not capitalizing on the stuff we're used to seeing from you. You're also not capitalizing on, you know, the softcore Skinamax stuff. But they took a chance on it and it paid off. And I'm thankful that it did, because the way that history has been written for Full Moon Beyond here is something that I love reading about and talking about. And that's really why we're here doing this show, because it's such an odd, you know, company and with such odd circumstances. And I'm just happy that this was a gamble that paid off.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is an interesting kind of fulcrum point for the entire franchise going forward and for that entire company going forward. Do you have any final thoughts on this, Ailish?
I mean, no final thoughts. I think I've put them all out here. I just think it's a real gem of a movie that, you know, I went in with really low expectations the first time I watched it, and my expectations were surpassed by a lot. So.
And I will say I liked this movie more on second viewing than I did on the first. So I think just keep drilling it into me. I think I'm going to get on board.
Yes.
And as a woman, did you find that, like, in your first viewing, do you recognize everything as intentional and as subversion, or do you think that there is some stuff in here that's a product of his time that we just read differently now as an audience in 2023?
I mean, I think a lot of it was incredibly intentional, and a surprising amount of the feminism and the pokes at feminism were still relevant in, you know, 2010 and stuff like that. And I also think that Jim's character was incredibly well done, because as a woman in STEM...
Steve is reluctantly agreeing with you.
As a woman who is in STEM, I have dealt with plenty of men who have been like, no, you're wrong because you're a woman, and I'm right because I'm a man. And Jim very much takes that road a lot of the time.
It's true. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just the swinging your balls around until you're correct. Yeah. That's how I get through my life. Yeah. Absolutely.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ailish, for being on here and for expounding on your number one favorite movie, greatest movie ever made, tattooed on your face. People can't see. She has a Cannibal Women tattoo on her face.
Dude, the C goes around my eye.
It does.
The big mouth C, yeah.
No, we really do appreciate you having you coming on here and talking about this movie. And I just personally, I really do love that you break this out as like one of your favorite movies, because it's such a deep cut. It's really obscure these days, and I just think that's amazing that like this movie resonated with you, and I think that's awesome.
It's a fantastic film.
Yeah. And
yeah, I probably would have assumed, based on title and based on what I remembered about the movie before this viewing, that this would be something that would be dismissed by a female audience, or maybe an audience that wasn't a bunch of preteen boys discovering stuff on premium cable. And I would have been wrong about that. Like, I think I remembered, no, this is more straight comedy. This is less a skin flick. This is less an erotic. Because, you know, we've covered Piranha Women and we've covered Test Tube Teens from the year 2000. And those movies, they lean into comedy, but you can tell that the real draw is the nudity in those movies. Like, that's really what their mission statement is get these movies out to young, impressionable audiences. But with this movie, like, it genuinely feels like J.F. Lawton is saying something here in the script. And it's not shocking that the person who penned this would go on to have some success, even outside of the genre, across multiple genres. And you can definitely see it here. There's so much more subversion. I mean, yeah, there are some incredibly silly and dated elements to it that don't entirely hold up, but I mean, what 35-year-old movie really doesn't have them? If you really break them down and you really scrutinize and you want to point out flaws, yeah, this is obviously a flawed movie. It's a Full Moon adjacent low budget movie, and we always have to bring up some kind of flaws in them. But I did not remember this as being such a straight comedy. And there were moments when I got genuine laughs from lines that I think, you could sort of take at face value. Like the scene when they pick up, when Shannon Tweed and Adrienne Barbeau pick up their like battle weapons, and Shannon Tweed has like a battle axe in her hand and she can barely hold it. Like she can't spin it around. She can't do anything with it. And they really draw attention to that fact. And then the line of dialogue from Adrienne Barbeau in that exact moment when she's struggling is, "You handle yourself very well." And I thought that's so funny because we're looking at the exact opposite. We're looking at someone who can't handle this weapon and they're just kind of lightly clanking them together. And then I also chuckled at the fact that they dropped him and pick up fencing swords.
Yeah, they just had all these weapons like readily available. No, it's got kind of like a Naked Gun vibe in some places, when that really they're leaning into the silly, and I think there's a lot that really works here.
The best bit to me is when she's picking up her supplies from the school supply distributor, and she just keeps requesting more and more ridiculous things.
That is good. Yeah, I need an AK-47. I need a grenade launcher.
That was right out of like an "I'm gonna get you, sucker"
100%
type thing, where it's like they're gonna keep asking for more outlandish stuff, and this little school secretary is gonna keep providing it. But it's a very airplane like joke, a very Police Academy like joke. But you know what? Like it worked, and I think the script is pretty funny overall, and I think the leads in the movie are good, and Adrienne Barbeau is obviously a welcome force, and I had a lot of fun with this one this time. I think my threshold for parody is lower than it is for other genres. Like I recently watched Airplane again, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and there are moments in it I find really funny, but I have a tough time with 90 minutes of that, or 85 minutes of that. I hit that fatigue.
Bad comedies are rough. Like bad horror movies are fun, bad sci-fi movies are fun. Bad comedies just feel like they're failing, and I don't think this ever reaches that point. Like my own personal misgivings about the movie aside, and we do need to take them as just like, this is something specific to me, and like this is my own kind of personal hang up on this movie that's not going to apply to everybody. But like those hang-ups aside, I think this is a pretty funny and well-constructed movie for the most part.
With the exception of the Bill Maher dartboard that you built behind you. Yeah, I see it. Don't try to hide it from me. So, Steve, let me ask you, are we ranking this one? Because this is going to be a tough one to slide in, because I think if you look at it from... are they successful with what they set out to do?
Yeah.
Like this is probably more successful as a comedy than the first Subspecies and first Puppet Master are as horror films.
Possibly.
So I might actually be sliding this one in third behind Trancers and Robot Jocks.
Okay, all right, interesting. I'm going a little lower on it. I think I do kind of enjoy Puppet Master and Subspecies a little bit more for what they're doing, but I am putting this above Piranha Women. Cannibal Women are eating Piranha Women for lunch for me. So this puts it as like number 6 overall so far. But yeah,
I may actually. You know what? Now that I think about it, I might move it down too.
Like, no, I almost had him.
I started to think like, which will I revisit first? Subspecies and Puppet Master, or this? And probably Subspecies and Puppet Master. Although I do think that this is pretty successful as a comedy. So it's somewhere right in the middle so far for me.
Sorry, I snatched this right out of the bronze slot. I apologize.
It was in third.
I know. We're getting some looks, I will tell you. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks. If you like what you hear week to week, tell a friend, spread the word about the show. If you find the time, it would be amazing if you could jump on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Rate and review the show. Drop us a 5-star rating if you're a fan. If you're not, you don't have to do anything. You don't need to rate us any lower than that. You can just take your hand off the mouse, take your hand off the screen. You don't have to do it. But if you want to, write a nice review about the show too, that will just help us listen to your feedback and also reach a wider audience. So thank you guys. If you want to follow us on any of our socials, we have an official Instagram at @puppetmasters_Castle Freaks.
That's correct.
I believe it's _Castle Freaks. And then on Twitter at Castle Freaks 888.
For as long as that platform exists, I suppose. Yeah. May not be long.
That may be obsolete by the time you're hearing this episode. But follow us on our socials, comment, ask us questions, tell us what you like, what you don't like, and we're here for it. But we just want to thank you for spending some time with us, and thank you to Ailish for coming on and talking about her all-time favorite movie with us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It was great to have your expertise on this one. And be sure to tune in next week because we've got a big one. We are going one step beyond. Okay, I already did that. We are. I'm sorry. We are watching From Beyond, Stuart Gordon's Lovecraftian masterpiece. We've got a really exciting guest who's going to be on that episode as well. So definitely check that one out. We will be seeing you next time for From Beyond.